Hello, welcome to AI in Action. My name is Mari. I'm here with my husband Jim, and we have a guest today. Chris is with us. We are here to talk about artificial intelligence and technology in K-12 education. So, Chris, would you please take just a second to introduce yourself to the audience?
Of course, thank you. My name's Chris Hull. I am a former seventh grade social studies teacher. I taught for 11 years um, north of Chicago, so the Chicagoland area. And now I am president and co-founder of Otis. And Otis is an amazing company that allows you to um, take information about students, and that can be assessment data and all this other information about students, and provide insights that can give you a single integrated platform. So we support standards-based grading, and we allow educators to assess, track performance, and really understand who they are, so we can really drive progress forward for everybody involved.
Awesome, awesome. So, one of the things that I'm very interested in is the fact that you were in a classroom, right, before you went and you founded a technology company. So, what did your time in the classroom have influence over when it was you starting an EdTech company?
Yeah, I think it comes down to that word EdTech, and it really comes down to, so often we look at education as um, a shorthand, so ed or tech. And if you ask any, technologist, or if you ask any educator, there's a lot of nuance in those words. And so the biggest takeaway that I took is teaching's about relationships. And I always looked for technology to be practical. So I wanted, every time I use technology, if it's how I used a Google Drive document, or if how I possibly digitize some of my curriculum for my students, of, hey, let's give them choices of videos or articles, it really came down to, how am I going to be more efficient so I can better connect with my students? And so I really wanted technology to save time. And it was this understanding that really came from Otis, where how do I think teaching and learning is the most important thing in life. So how do we provide more time and bandwidth for that? And really that's what's really driven me and Otis, is we've really looked to say, how can we listen and learn from districts to not add bells or whistles or this really cool feature, but how can we really support the teachers and students who are at the core of what school should be?
Okay. Well, so I was in the classroom when I think probably the very first time the words were uttered that were data-driven instruction. Okay. And so data-driven instruction to me might mean one thing versus the teacher across the hall. It might mean something else. So I know that Otis integrates like assessment information and all the different reporting information that you get from like map testing or beginning of the year, middle of the year, end of the year assessments, so you bring in all of this information for a student, and then you use that data to try to fill in the gaps, right? Like where the student might be missing information. What do you think is the biggest misconception that you might have, or a teacher might have, about how to use that data? Because I always find that, like, if I have 25 kids, 27 kids, 30 kids in a classroom, and that's in elementary, or if I'm in junior high or high school and I'm looking at 120 kids on my class roll, how does that data help me fill in those gaps if I have that many kids?
Yeah, I think it comes down to, if you think back to your favorite teacher, they just seem to know you. They just seem to get you. And that can take time. It's one of those things where the first 6 to 10 weeks in the classroom, it's getting to know everybody. I was middle school, right? So I had between 125, 150 students. And to me, that's the gap we're trying to bridge. We're trying to provide that secret sauce that's going to allow you to connect to that student. And the misnomer to me is, teachers really do have amazing insight on so many of their kids, but
Mhm.
it's not every kid. And the biggest struggle and the biggest, unfortunate part is, we don't articulate information from one teacher to another teacher very well. And I used to do this exercise for during report card season where I would sit in front of um, my SIS computer and basically, the screen, and I had to basically write a note for every kid's report card. And my challenge was I wanted to be able to write that note without looking at anything else. I wanted to have all of that in my memory of the kid. I wanted to be able to know their name. I wanted to be able to know their performance in my classroom. I wanted to be able to know their strengths and areas to get better. And I wanted to be able to type all of this up from memory. Because if I could do that, that meant when I was in the classroom and I was walking around and I was teaching either the colonization of the United States, or if I was teaching, about World War I or whatever I was teaching, the content didn't matter as much. I knew how to make an analogy that would connect to that student. I knew, hey, this kid would be great at verbal reasoning, but they might struggle at something else. Like, how can I then fill in that gap? And teachers are doing this instinctively. Oh man, Johnny might need an extra prompt. Or, hey, I'm just going to go by my presence near a certain student. If I walk the classroom, they're going to be more on task. Like, we have this innately there, but when we really are mapping it to what's going to unlock that kid's potential or unlock or unblock them from learning something, all of a sudden you find yourself being more effective. And all of a sudden you find yourself, it becomes contagious in the classroom where these group of kids are pushing themselves to learn because they're engaged. And so to me, all of this comes down to engagement. All of this information allows you to connect and engage with your kids. And that's the misconception that it's like data and math and graphs and correlations. And really it's just allowing you to understand what is needed to help move things forward.
Right. I think one of the things I used to tell Jim, I'm going to let you get the next question after I make this comment. One of the things I used to tell my kids at the beginning, I was junior high also. I was elementary, then junior high, and then a counselor, and then a principal. And, so the only thing I haven't done is drive a bus. No, hang on. I did drive a bus for a year. The only thing I haven't done is mow a lawn. And I keep telling them I'm going to mow the lawns this summer. The thing that I used to tell my kids at the beginning of the year is, okay, I'm going to know your name within the first week if you are a really great student. Like you're like there and you're, the Susie Sunshines is what I used to tell them. Or I'm going to know your name if you are one of those kids that just give me misery. I said, which that's not why you want me to know your name. What I'm concerned about are those kids in the middle. We call them the bubble kids. So does Otis help pinpoint those kids that are in the middle?
Yeah, it allows you to group students in any of those spectrums. You're going to see the top kids, you're going to see the students who might need the most help, but it's also going to allow you to understand some nuances with those kids. You call them the bubble kids. To me, it really needs to be able to see each kid for who they are. That quiet kid who sometimes might get everything, but never wants to open his mouth. Like it'll be able to unlock that. Or, students who might be amazing at leading, but they need help with actually some of the execution. And Otis is really allowing you to take all the information you have from not just what you're gathering in your classroom, but what's been happening in the past classrooms or in the other classrooms that year. And you're getting this more complete picture so that, again, it's one of the really good analogies I think that works is it's kind of like the medical industry. You go to your doctor, they know you, they've seen you, but when you go to a specialist, they need to have that profile of you so that you're not just repeating everything over again. You want to get that jump start. And Otis helps with that jump start for everything, the middle, anywhere.
Well, I haven't been in the classroom full time, but I've been a tech director for 20 years and I am an engineer. And I can tell you that I've heard descriptions of your product more than once. So I think this is maybe an opportunity for you to tell me, if you're talking to someone like me, I'm looking at it going, how much does it cost? And why is it doing anything? I mean, I literally get hundreds of emails from people with variations on a theme in terms of helping teachers better either save time in classroom. We'll get to the AI part of it in a second, because my perspective on AI is it's a natural language interface for something that better to have a use anyway. The AI itself, I don't see it. Yes, it can add value because it can give you patterns and things that you're maybe not going to catch. But at the end of the day, it also gives me the ability to have a conversation with the stuff that I normally would have had more structured, an unstructured conversation. So let's focus on your product itself. I'm a tech director. Why are you any different?
Yeah, I mean, why are we different? I think we're born from the classroom, and I think everyone says that. Unfortunately, I wish
They
I could
do.
say that classrooms. It's I was there for a little bit, and really it comes from understanding that so much else in ed tech is structured in varieties of ways. It could be like an LMS, which is structured around a course or a class, or some of these other systems that were started off as a different set of tools. Otis has always been grounded and rooted in the fact that it's about the student. Everything goes to a student profile. So that when you're a teacher, you can look at a single kid, or you can look at, if you're an administrator, if you're in like a PLC, you can look at a group of kids. Or if you're at a tech director, you can even look at cohorts of kids. And really, I think the difference is also rooted in the fact that, we're $10 a student. There are no real crazy add-ons. It's really trying to keep things simple. We put all of these tools together. And again, if you want to use part of Otis, it's a little bit less. But all of Otis, that's what it is. And really what happens then is we can get away from all of this ifs, ands, and buts and what is really happening. And to me, the three things it's about. One, it's about the kids. So getting all this information, which we've talked about to begin with. But then, Jim, to your question, it comes to the two things that were learned when I was in the classroom. One, not every teacher is great at technology. In fact, most teachers, that's not why they're in education. They're not even very good at it. They're not always there doing it. Now, some
I noticed.
Right? Right? Exactly. Two, not every educator is great at data. Data is a 4-letter word. It's my bad joke as a 7th grade teacher, right? It's like almost profanity to some. They don't want to see it as data. They don't know correlations. They're not going to know all of this stuff. They don't want to do pivot tables. And so we have taken the time in the past and we've made really simple graphs. So you can, again, group kids. So you see, back to your point, there is going to be all these different groups that are, hey, these are the kids who are similar on this scale or similar in this behavior. Because that's how teachers think, differentiation. What AI is going to do is it does exactly what you mentioned. AI is not some magic wand, but it allows you to do something that we're actually pretty good at as teachers: ask questions in plain English. I could give you a graph, or I could allow you to ask a question. How are my 3rd graders who go in for lunch intervention doing? Well, we could create a report, but Jim, what typically happens in that situation is they're coming to you. I don't know how to create this report. Even if we have help articles and videos, and even if it's like 3 clicks, that's not what they want to focus on. But if they can just ask the question, hey, now they can get those insights and actually make it meaningful. And that's where AI is most powerful. We've collected all this information about a kid. We've organized it really, really nicely because we've been delivering it and making it discoverable to educators. And that's actually been our vision since 2015 and 16. We thought it was actually going to be machine learning. We thought we were going to have to create all of these little assistants, like a curriculum assistant, a data assistant, name the assistant. What the large language models and some of these companies that are spending billions of dollars have made it easier for us to do is we can actually allow one agent or assistant to help you just in plain English. And that's where I hope, Jim, not that I'm rambling here, that is the difference, because this promise has been told and shared by too many people, and it's made my job harder because there is a lot of, okay, I'll believe it when I see it. I've believed we're going to have unified insights about this stuff. That's where I'm like, we've proved it. We've seen it. We have districts who are doing it. Now you just have to let us show you that it's real. Mm-hmm. And that's hard on a podcast, but I'm telling you it's possible, because you go into Otis and you say, oh, how is Jim doing? You go to their profile. You can see how they're doing in your classroom and every classroom that they're in. You can see their attendance data, their behavior data, their academic data from the classroom, in addition to these third-party assessments, NWA, Dreambox, ACT, SAT, DIBELS, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, I can see their entire history.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really where the power becomes, because the promise and the words and the, to use the phrase, the elevator pitch, you've heard. But we think we've kept the pricing reasonable. Not, I wish I could give it everybody for $2, but we're doing pretty amazing technical things, so there is some cost. But $10 a kid is a reasonable yearly cost that we think can really save educators, which we've gotten proof from them, 1 to 2 hours a week. And if you save 1 or 2 hours a week, it's not like that time's going nowhere. That time's being reinvested in students.
I like the idea that you can go to a student profile and see everything from like previous years, and then, all of the test stuff. I'm assuming you pull this in programmatically from all the other testing platforms that, like NWEA, you mentioned that. So I'm assuming that
we have a lot of partnerships with them. Yeah, a lot of partnerships with them. So that happens. And then also what we do, because we know not everybody is, as it seems like Jim's background as an engineer, he can do quite a bit. But a lot of our tech directors are former teachers.
Absolutely.
Who are really good at AV setup, or really good at this.
Yeah.
So we actually have a team, we call it our client data team, and we set up some of the automations as well. Sometimes these systems are only able to handle SFTP and things like that. That's unfortunate. We also handle API and things like that. We really meet the districts with where they're at. But we automate that all from the district, so they're not dealing with that. They have too many other things going on. As you mentioned, figuring out who's going to fill in on the bus, maybe even the lawn. Again, it's this idea of we need to put time back. So yeah, the data gathering, the data automations, the nightly syncs and all that stuff we handle so that you have this information in real time.
As I said, I like that idea, because when I was getting my master's degree, my my dissertation type thing, or the thing you have to do toward the end of that, I wrote it on workroom bias. Because, you have the bias that happens in school districts to where, the kid is lower socioeconomic, or, a female versus male, all the different types of bias that you might have in the classroom. But what people tend to forget about is the teacher from the previous year talking about, oh, you have that kid in your class this coming year. Well, guess what? And so it's that workroom conversations between the teachers that follow the kids through the system that we don't tend to think about. But if you could go look at a profile of a student and see, okay, well, here's exactly what happened. Here's all those discipline referrals. Here's all those, and then you might know where to meet the kid at the first day of school to try to change that paradigm, give them a fresh start kind of thing. So I like that idea. So back to a few more questions that I have here. I told you we're really bad about getting off script. Personalized learning. This is a great way to start that, right? You look at your information and you can personalize it, but there's only one teacher. How do you see AI and like the future of technology helping those teachers, cover that specific gap? Let's say you have like 17 different gaps in a room of 25 kids. How do you see that happening in the future?
Future's now. It's that possible today in Otis, but you're able to look at it. And if, let's say, you're an ELA teacher, you can say, what are the standards my students need to be focused on? And it will, again, look at your standards-based gradebook or your standards-informed instruction or your assessments and basically give you a grouping. These 3 students need help on this skill. These 4 students need help on this one. And all of a sudden, you'll get these groupings and these pairings. And all of a sudden, you're going to be like, okay, that's helpful. But then because we've been grounded in education and there's a lot of educational research, we can actually provide you a list of 2 or 3 learning activities and resources that's going to really help you. Again, we have a partnership with Discovery, so later, in the fall. So all that possible learning strategies and the groupings is happening. We're actually going to then recommend the resources that would match. All of a sudden, we might know that somebody is really good at verbal reasoning, or somebody else might have a really good visual memory. Maybe somebody needs a video, somebody needs an article. We're then recommending kind of like a menu of what you could do. The teacher is still in that driver's seat, but instead of having to go decipher the grade book and group kids themselves. And instead of thinking about, well, I was taught like 40 strategies as my teaching time or all my PD, it's kind of giving you that reminder. And for Jim as an engineer, it's kind of that co-pilot tool that you see in GitHub and some of these others. It's not replacing, it's helping supplement the fact that, like, if I can give you recommendations, it's beautiful. It's sometimes in the heat of the moment in the classroom, you have your tried and true 2 things that you always go to. But now that prep work is now done. And so instead of having to spend 30 or 45 minutes creating the groups and coming up with this and thinking about that, you're able to, in plain English, ask for it, decide what you want to do from a menu, and now you can then spend the time executing it. So in the past, when you might have only had 2 or 3 groups, because that's all you had time to plan for and prepare for, now you might be able to do 5 groups, 6 groups, and you might be able to structure them slightly different. One day you might do homogeneous groups, one time you might do heterogeneous groups. You might know certain kids that could lead a group in the right situation and allow you to really focus in on kids. And again, it's not making the job easy. I really struggle, back to Jim said, he hears these pitches all the time. I hate when an EdTech vendor says, we make teaching and learning easy.
It's never going to be easy.
It's never going to be easy. It's going to be easier. But the idea is we're going to give you the time to what matters most, which is, again, those unlocking those aha moments. And that's really where our focus is at. And that's, to me, where personalized is happening, where differentiation, personalization, we're connecting the dots between assessments and behavior and these cognitive pieces. And we're helping the educator plan more efficiently, effectively, and really allowing them to be better set up for success.
Is there a delivery mechanism directly to the students, or is the delivery mechanism from the teacher?
Yeah, so we have an advisory board. So we have a group of about 30 districts have helped us out and give us these insights. And AI is super powerful. I let my kids, experiment with it, especially with like coloring book pages and things like that. But I still think we need supervision, especially in the K-12 space. So based upon feedback, based upon our own understanding, is everything is still delivered to the educator and to the adults. Right? It could be to the administrator, it could be to the teacher. But I think that we still need to be at that place where, again, I referenced co-pilot. Like, sure, an engineer can have that direct interface, but I believe, and maybe I'm tempering expectations or I'm holding back the future, I still think we need to have that guidance. And so it goes to the teacher.
Good. I was curious about that because, you mentioned all the different things that you could do. Go ahead, Jim.
I can tell you, as an engineer who spent the last 3 years doing nothing but playing with language models, and based on a very interesting conversation Mari and I both have had with kids recently about how they use ChatGPT or any other language model, I can tell you that the kids are not equipped. They think they are, but they are not equipped to understand the capabilities and the downsides of what AI can and can't do, the boundaries, the limitations. Even the adults aren't. Most adults aren't even really fully understanding what those boundaries are. Personally, I mean, we have an AI chatbot that we've made available to teachers that I created, but we don't make it available to students. We will, maybe we will eventually, but I do understand that learning is and should be a messy process. I get that, but I think it's a guided messy process at this point. I think if it gets to the point where if you throw them out there, that's what we did. That's what everybody did with social media. And look at that dumpster fire. I mean, everybody threw the kids in, and the kids are smart. They'll figure it out. And let's trust Zuckerberg. He won't do bad. But the reality is it's a dumpster fire, and it's had enormously bad impact on mental health and all the other stuff. So I'm an advocate of students not having unsupervised access yet. I don't think they're ready. I think maybe another generation down the road they may be, but they're not. Right now, they think of it as a super Google, and it's not a super Google. It's not even close. So anyway, I do agree
Right.
with
You,
your philosophy.
you need the guides and the guardrails, right? You
You
need the
do for
guides
now,
and the guardrails, and you
and they
need
have to
for
have a
right now.
human.
Everybody does. Everybody does.
Yeah.
The number of mistakes, we're an AI forward company. We really push people, but we have to have these reminders of if you put the wrong information in or you have the wrong prompt in, it's difficult. One of the things, I say what we struggle with, we're really good at answering certain questions. We've had to be very, very intentional and deliberate about having our assistant, our AI tool. If it doesn't know something, we have to really push. And we've done a lot of things in the back end, the mechanisms to say, I don't know. I don't
Yeah,
have that
it is hard to get
information.
it to say I don't know. But the fact is our belief is that teachers are supposedly trained and educated people, therefore they have the cognitive ability to make a decision as to whether or not what they're getting is reasonable. It is a great language interface for things, but it can give you wrong answers. And yes, if you've done what I think you've done, you've got system prompts and things that are surrounding our pipelines in place that are making sure that the query in and query, the answer back are reasonable and data driven to some degree, but it can slip out of the guardrails. That's what the teachers are for. It's called human in the loop. It's called human in the loop. It's not something that needs to. I think humans should stay in the loop for now. So, I mean, I think your approach is what I would do if I was in your shape in terms of how I would handle AI. I can't talk about the rest of the stuff, but the AI piece of it, that's definitely how I would handle it. So it sounds like you're on the right track.
So you've
We've
been on
been
this
very,
track for,
yeah.
go ahead.
I was going to say, we've been very fortunate. So we've been talking about this with different groups. From Amazon's been amazingly helpful for such a long time, but we've also worked with, Northwestern, Harvard, the University of Penn. I can go through so many groups that we've really been in contact with, fortunately enough, because we've been thinking about this for a decade. Now, again, it's amazing what's changed in terms of the technology. And like we were trying to train it around some machine learning pieces and just not getting the success. And we kept on having to be like, nope, it's not ready. It's not ready. And it's really only now, but it's ready in very specific ways. It's really good if you give it information for it to translate it to different things. Like one of my favorite ways it worked was a district of ours was having parent teacher conferences, and they've just adopted standards-based grading, standards-informed instruction, and they were trying to explain this to the community, which is often a pain point. And they were using our tool and they were asking, how do I explain standards-based grading to, again, this father who's a mechanic? And again, it took the information. It didn't have to reinvent it, didn't have to do calculations, didn't have to do it. It took something that it already had, and it just was able to explain that, hey, you don't just say the car's good when you go to your mechanic. You break down different things. Hey, this is how your transmission is. This is how this is. And it all of a sudden said, now you've given a measurement for each one of these different components that allows you to understand where you're at. And the light bulb went off for this father, this family, and this teacher was all of a sudden struggling. Like, well, how do I explain it to all these people?
Right.
That was that unlocking moment where, again, the human in the loop was able to kind of look at it and like, oh, that's right. That was the hit. And the same thing can happen with families. The same thing happens with students. It doesn't know every detail, but it can really shortcut the work to come up with these ideas because it can say, oh, here's 3 or 4 ideas. And then you can pick which one's going to be the most impactful.
So, Chris, I want to ask you, November the 20th, 2022 is when ChatGPT hit. When you first saw it, Otis has been around before large language models. When it first came out and you first saw this, I want you to explain what you felt. What did that mean for you? I know Jim, I give him a hard time all the time. He literally woke me up 4:30 in the morning. He had early access to it. He wakes me up 4:30, Mara, you've got to see this. This is going to change the world. What was your reaction?
I'm embarrassed to admit I was a little dubious because I've been given a lot of people who'd said, oh, check out this thing, check out this model. Hey, we're going to be able to really help you with, linking standards to this. It's going to be able to do it. And I heard all this excitement. and I was a little dubious. Then I started to play and explore, and I was like, we use Slack. All of a sudden, we're Slack, and we're talking about it. We jumped on a couple of Zooms, and I'm like, I think this is it. This is what we've been waiting for. Like, we're not going to have to train. Again, we had like 12 different assistants we wanted to train. And all of a sudden, it's like, I think this is going to be, we said, shortcut to get this assistant of taking this flood of information that's overwhelming educators and allowing them to interact with the data and information in a much more meaningful way. It's putting things into plain English. I keep coming back to that phrase because it was so digestible and deliverable. You could put, all of this information that we might have researched or several pages, and all of a sudden it could give you that great summary.
Now,
all of a sudden that great analogy.
Right. One of the things that Jim and I, we are working on a thing for our district that's like a TEKS unpacker. It's one of the things that we have here in Texas. We do the Texas TEKS or the TEKS. And the unpacker basically goes through and it takes that information and it gives the teacher something like, here's 1, 2, 3, 4, here's your standard, here's your academic vocabulary, here's, and so we're putting this into an AI. And just the other day we were working on it where we were taking all of these spreadsheets that had the frequency that a certain standard had been tested since 2021, I think it was. And it like halfway through the data ingestion, it like messed up, and it got off by 1 or whatever. How do you handle that? Do you still have, again, the human in the loop? Do you still have all of your people that have to sit there and like, yes, this was ingested appropriately. Yes, this is correct information. How do you handle that?
Yeah, this is where we've been fortunate. And, that was some of the limitations we saw. Like, I come back to my simple, it's not great at math. In some ways, it's like asking an English teacher to do a huge math problem for you, right? That's my silly analogy. And where we were fortunate enough is, again, going back to these machine learning, like we had to do so much programmatically to put the information into a very specific format that we had very structured information. We never have asked the AI to do the calculations. We already have the calculations. We already have the reports. Like, for example, in our grade book, we have the standard, including the description, the title, and all this information. We also have the number of attempts clearly labeled. We also have, their performance, which could be done by decaying average or most recent. These calculations are done. So we're not asking it to do it. We're just basically saying, instead of it being in a graph form, again, 25 kids, we've made it a really pretty graph. Teachers have a lonely profession. How can I ask, like, am I reading this correctly? Am I getting this right? So those limitations we still see. And again, I think Jen made, like, is it going to be able to do these crazy calculations? It's like, that's not what we are asking it to do. We're asking it to take what could have been a report because it's already in our database, it's already formatted in a certain way, and just allow people to say, hey, how are my third graders with the IEP doing versus my third graders without? Or how is this cohort of students doing without? Well, because we already have that, we just had to be able to, we made it more discoverable and deliverable.
Awesome. Well, we are out of time. I really appreciate your coming on and talking to us about Otis today. I really do. It sounds very, very interesting. Jim, do you have anything else?
No, you might want to send me a link. Maybe I'll have a look at it and see if I like it for our school district. But I am interested in not just from an AI perspective. I'm interested in your approach because you spent so much time focused on what it's doing before AI. I think that's the problem I'm having with a lot of the AI products is it was built for AI. And in many cases, AI was the solution looking for the problem instead of the problem looking for the solution. And I think that's the wrong approach to any problem. I don't think it's just AI. I think and the companies that do the AI, the foundation models, they knew their business model. They've done a great job. The problem they're even having now, though, is they're having a hard time finding ways to integrate it into people's everyday workflows. It's not trivial. It's because people have an ingrained way they do things, and when you start trying to shove that thing in there, it doesn't do so well. So I think your approach was the correct order, which is why it might be interesting to look at.
I think that's why I really enjoy talking to engineers. And I think teachers are similar to engineers because it's not about the cool tool. You don't go to the hardware store and pick out something without having a practical reason to do it. And that to me is the biggest difference we try to have in our approach is what are we trying to do? And then let's use the right tool to do that. And AI is just an amazing tool when
It is
put in the right place and not just something cool. Now, it does do some pretty cool things, like some of its like video creation stuff is like absolutely like mind-blowing. But how do we embed it into practical workflows is the key.
Right.
Yes.
Absolutely. Well, Chris, it was very nice having you on today. We really appreciate it. My name is Mari. I'm here with my husband, Jim. This is AI in Action, and we do hope that you guys have a marvelous rest of the week.
Thank you.